Well, with South Africa's critical budget coming up on Wednesday, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Charles de Wet, tax executive from ENS Africa, to the show today. Charles, thanks for joining us. Very important time. A lot of big decisions coming up on Wednesday.
That's right. Budget week is always an important week in South Africa, and it's when the Minister of Finance gets to tell us whether his budget is balanced, whether he needs to go out and borrow more money, and very importantly for the man in the street, what the impact of any tax changes is going to be.
Of course, and the elephant in the room, of course, is the energy crisis, load shedding. Can we expect anything there? I mean, of course, tax collections is a big issue. But when it comes to, any alleviation of the load, and incentives for people with solar, etc., can we expect something on that front?
It certainly sounds like there's going to be some movement on that. I mean, the Commissioner, Kisvet, announced that sort of a week ago that was on the agenda. I mean, the President in the State of the Nation address also made reference to that. So I think, it's likely that there will be some announcements. It's a little bit difficult to work out exactly what that announcement could be, simply because there are already quite favourable capital allowances or deductions against taxable income that businesses are entitled to. So when it's less than 1 megawatt, you can deduct all your capital expenditure, except maybe in respect of batteries in 1 year, and otherwise you deduct it over 3 years at sort of 50, 30, 20 basis. But it's likely that this relief could come in a couple of other forms. One, in terms of some sort of subsidy payment, just to help people with the initial capital cost in the circumstances. I think from business perspective that would make a difference. And then also, from individuals currently, or for individuals rather, currently they're not entitled to any kind of tax deduction for the hundreds of thousand rands that they need to spend to put up a proper solar system. And hopefully there'll be some sort of announcement that will give them a tax benefit in those circumstances as well, specifically when they are supplying any excess generation capacity back onto the grid, because potentially that then, they are then conducting a trade and maybe qualify for good tax incentives on that basis as well.
Yeah, the costs are quite high. I mean, I just got quoted 126,000. Everyone is looking at these alternatives, and it's steep. For the average household in South Africa, GDP, not growing strongly, inflation on the rise. So I think that'll be most welcome. Average guy just can't afford those numbers, to get a couple of solar panels up. And the whole thing is if we can alleviate the load, that's great. Now, I just wanted to talk about load shedding and the impact on the broader tax base. It's a concern because we've had collections, we've had, being propped up by, the commodities boom. But this load shedding impact on business is a bit of a concern as well, right?
I think it's going to have a significant impact on tax collections. It kind of sort of at two levels probably. Turnover is down. People don't want to go to shopping centres when the lights are not on. Even in some instances when they do have backup generators, and just the additional costs associated with staying up. We've seen some of the big retailers announce really big numbers as far as that's concerned, and that has a direct impact on their profit, and that means that they're going to be making less profit, and as a result of that pay less tax. The counter to that is that they would be paying fuel levy on the purchase of diesel for the generators, and that's something else that should get attention. The purpose of the fuel levy and the road accident fund is to look after the roads and not to keep shopping centres and other businesses operational. So hopefully that is something that will be dealt with as well.
Of course, wealth taxes, is a perennial kind of discussion. Unlikely this year?
I think it's always been unlikely, and I think it's more unlikely this year than ever before. We've seen because of the situation that we find ourselves in, we've seen lots of people emigrate. As a result of that, the tax-paying population continues to decrease, and any increase in either the maximum marginal rate above 45% or the introduction of a wealth tax, while would go down well from a political perspective, I think would have a really negative economic impact, and something that it would be a very brave finance minister that went down that road, simply because it won't really have a blip on the budget. All the numbers are just not worth the negative news that goes with it.
Yeah, and then of course, obviously inflation on the rise. I mean, how will that deal with the bracket creep issue?
So, I mean, we've always, seen a fiscal drag adjustment, which is, to account for inflation because of people's salaries increasing slightly. I mean, in the early 2000s, Minister Manuel used to make a big deal of the amount of money that he was putting back into taxpayers' pockets. It kind of went off the boil a little bit because I think our inflation rates were lower, so there was no necessity to make that big adjustment. I mean, I would expect this year that there will be some sort of adjustment. I think it's unlikely to be the full impact of inflation. We've seen higher inflation in the last little while, so one would hope for a higher adjustment to the tables to account for bracket creep. But I just think it's not affordable in the circumstances. So while the individuals are the largest taxpayers, I think that when it'll get to the point where there will be some sort of token adjustment as far as that's concerned, but not the full impact of inflation. So everybody's going to be poorer after Wednesday.
Yeah, and of course the top marginal rate 45. You obviously no change there, 45%.
Yeah, I can't envisage any change there at all.
Any change?
Must stay at 45%. There are too few people that are in that bracket in any case, and so no change is expected.
Yeah, and then of course corporate tax. We've had the new change years ending on or after 31 March 2023. So that's kind of in play at the moment. Quite a nice relief for businesses. Any change expected on that front?
We would hope that there would be a change announced. I mean, I think it's probably premature at this stage. I mean, last time it was sort of on a no-cost basis, so there were limitations to assess losses being transferred, and sort of interest rules, or the deductibility of interest in the circumstances. That hasn't worked its way through the system completely. So I would expect National Treasury would first want to see the impact of that. So I think that they're going to be conservative as far as that's concerned. I mean, the issue is that to a very large extent, our tax rate is still very high in global terms, and we need foreign direct investment. So, an announcement, a further reduction of tax rate would be very, very positive, and I think would have, a good impact on business confidence. But to balance the budget and where we're at the moment, I think it's unlikely that there'll be any changes in that space.
And of course, we need economic growth desperately. There was a bit of an uproar over the proposed restrictions on capital allowances. Probably not likely, that type of thing. A bit of an uproar on that at the time. What is your expectation on the capital allowance front?
Yeah, so there's been pushback on that, and sort of in terms of using that as a tax instrument. It is a great instrument to encourage investment, and by encouraging investment, hopefully you build economic growth into it, which we desperately need, because that will increase the size of the tax base as well. But very unlikely that there will be any changes on that. I mean, there's been a concerted plan over time to reduce those capital allowances, and specifically to make sure that some industries don't benefit more than others. So kind of a hope would be, yes, let's allow them so that we can get economic growth. But I think in the real world there won't be a significant change, and we're going to see over time a further reduction in those allowances.
And then when it comes to withholding tax on income flows to non-residents, I know we're at, I think, 15% there. Any expected change on that front?
Again, no change expected. So, maybe we're heading for sort of a no-news budget from, in terms of sort of the run-of-the-mill stuff. I think there's a possibility that people would say, let's increase it to 20% because that'll generate more revenue. But I think the sensible answer is it should stay the same. Let's make it worthwhile for people to invest capital and not pay more tax in the circumstances. So we would not want to see any change on that at all.
Now, of course, when you're faced with high inflation like this, some jurisdictions have implemented temporary VAT rate decreases. What can we expect on that front? It's not politically popular, of course, and we recently had the VAT change.
So, long term, the VAT rate has to increase. I think it's the only way that some of the programs that have been announced, in terms of the basic income grant and, the national health insurance, it's the only way that it becomes affordable. 1% increase in VAT rate is probably translates into about 25 billion rand in additional income. South Africa has always, sort of resisted the change in COVID. They didn't, reduce the rate to stimulate the economy. To an extent, I think it's not affordable. So, while on the medium term there must be an expectation of an increase in the VAT rate, sort of edging up to 16 or 17%. I think we would then be close to the African average and still below the global average. But it's not going to happen this year.
We're, of course, under the radar of the FATF with the grey listing decision coming up pretty soon, end of Feb, 24th, I believe. And SARS is very pivotal in tackling illicit trade. And do we expect any big announcements on that? I know there's been a couple of cases relating tobacco industry and money laundering, for instance.
We've seen sort of the programs increasing on that. Illicit trade is still a very big part of the economy, and there's lots of lost taxes in those circumstances. So that would be a good way to for SARS to bolster their finances. We have seen improvements, some actions that have been taken. But it's certainly something that needs much more attention, so we can get everybody into the legitimate economy and paying their fair share of taxes. So hopefully, there will be some announcements around that and around the excise program and the way the way that it's calculated. So I think there's a big sense at the moment that the current methodology probably stimulates illicit trade than discouraging it.
I've been chased a little bit to pay my TV license, which I did as a good citizen. And I know there's talk of this digital device tax for TV license. Do you expect anything on that front in the budget?
It's been on the radar for a while. There are issues in terms of the collection of license fees, etc. And I think the president was very precise in terms of the changes that were happening in the transmission space. It's probably a small change. There are challenges around that. So if I had to bet on anything specific, I think this would be it.
Okay, brilliant. Now, of course, climate change, the Paris Accord, and big decisions made with a just energy transition. South Africa has to start implementing this movement. And of course, carbon taxes. Have been waiting for a little bit of a stronger drive and implementation. Where will we be with carbon taxes?
Well, last year there was a big announcement and kind of the long-term plan. That was quite significant, and a significant increase in rates. That's been trimmed back slightly in the circumstances, but we still have a long way to go with on that. And it is important that from a policy perspective we get it right, and sort of encourage businesses to comply on that. So one would hope that there would be an announcement in terms of exactly what the plan is as far as that's concerned. I think the rates are already out there, but we need to get people's buy-in to this, and that they for the good of the environment take account of it, as opposed to just it being another tax that reduces their profit margin.
And of course, for individuals, some people want to pay down debt post-COVID, etc. And there was this talk of this two-part, well, there is a two-part retirement system being implemented, but slightly postponed. Can we expect an update?
Again, hopefully there will be an update. I think last year's announcement was premature. Part of the public hearings, there's a lot more admin associated with it. It's more complicated than was envisaged at that particular point in time. It is very important, though, in terms of long-term sustainability and reliance on the state for pension funding, etc. It's important that when we get this policy instrument implemented as fast as possible. So again, a status update and a policy direction on this, and I think confirmation that they're still going down this road would be very positive.
Well, Charles, thanks very much for the timing. Great chatting to you. I think you've highlighted some really important aspects that we need to look out for and that are imperative to getting South Africa's fiscal strength up and rebuilding that fiscal space. So thanks very much. It's been great chatting to you.
Thanks, Aaron. Great talking to you about the budget. Always an exciting time.
Indeed. Yes, we're going to watch closely. Obviously maybe not as many surprises, but I think it's literally going to be critical, just to kickstart this economy and give the support where it's needed. So, Charles, thanks very much.
It's a pleasure.